Hello again and welcome back to AF Anime. I am John, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing One Piece chapter 1030, which is titled Echoing the Impermanence of All Things. And with the exception of a couple pages, this chapter does a great job, like the last one, of giving some shine and some acknowledgement for the worst generation who is present in Wano. However, before we talk about those guys, let's go ahead and get the request cover page out of the way. It is another request cover page, and this one is of Brook avoiding the stomping or harming of a bunch of marching ants, and it is as boring as it sounds, so I'm just going to move on. Now, when it comes to the beginning of the chapter, this one starts off with two of the worst generation members in the form of Drake and Scratchman Apu. And Apu seems to be trying to coax Drake into assisting him or aligning with him to finish off the victor of the fight between Kaido and Luffy. Now, ultimately, we do not get Drake's answer in this chapter, but we see that Scratchman Apu still has the numbers on his side. So I would be interested to see exactly where their loyalties lie. For now, it seems like it's not with Kaido, more so with Scratchman Apu, but that just seems weird to me. But moving along, we next check in with Usopp, and we see that he has come across Kinemon's legs, which is a callback to the events of Punk Hazard. And at first I had some narrative issues with this because I know that Kinemon hasn't encountered Law since being felled by Kaido. But apparently, and I guess this kind of fits, it seems that he was never actually put back together by Law himself, so his body is still technically separated by whatever Law did. Just seems like a bit of narrative convenience, but I can't really complain because it technically does fit. So Nami and Usopp managed to find a way to communicate with Kinemon's lower torso, and while doing so, Usopp realizes that Kinemon is gravely injured, and for the most part of this conversation or Usopp's appearance in this chapter, he seems to be fairly serious. And the last panel we see of Usopp, Nami, and their group is of Usopp leaving with Kinemon's legs, and he's riding the giraffe smile fruit user while telling Nami to take care of Tama while he's away. Now, the reason for Kinemon to separate himself like that is to send someone to assist in Kiku's survival. And in a turn of events that may or may not piss off most One Piece fans, we find out that Kiku, Kanjuro, and Kinemon are all still very much alive. And then we see that Orochi confirms his survival to Kinemon by chirping in while Kanjuro is laid out. And in their conversation, Orochi is essentially trying to be poetic and inspiring Kanjuro to give his life in one last attempt to obey his wishes and follow his leader. And Kanjuro does take the bait as he draws up a quote-unquote final attack called Kazenbo. And it kind of just appears to be a large blobby mass which is engulfed in flames. And it seems that Orochi is intent on having Kanjuro use his abilities to detonate all of the bombs at the bottom of Onigashima. And before all that's done, it appears that he just wants to bang out and take off and leave the conflict between the pirates to the pirates. And we also see that this creature that Kanjuro created has the ability to phase through walls, and that's an incredibly interesting aspect that I think would need some explanation. And even though we have no reason to believe that that's something that Kanjuro had the ability to do, or have his drawings phase through walls, now this makes zero sense to me, but I'm going to assume that Oda's not going to elaborate on it, as it was such a small panel that I almost feel like Oda has no desire to address that in any way, shape, or form. Now, Kanjuro's ghost abilities aside, we see a page which is beautifully drawn, and it shows all of the monster trio and their respective opponents in Kaido, King, and Queen. And on top of that page, we can actually see that CP0 is no longer in their little hideout and is now up and about and possibly even going after Robin. We also see that Yamato is trying to make her way down to the bottom level of Onigashima to disarm those bombs. We also get a small diagram showing us the path that Yamato needs to take to get down to disarm those bombs, but aside from that, it's just a really brief appearance from that character. And it is at this moment that we actually get the highlight of the chapter, when the fight between Big Mom, Kid, and Law breaks into a room where they are visible to Yamato. And in a twist that I never really saw coming, we find out that Kid and Law both have awakened their devil fruit. And not only is it announced, but in this chapter we actually get to see those awakened powers in use. And as Big Mom is putting the work to Kid by using the Ikaku sovereignty move on him, Law steps in by using his awakened devil fruit, starting off by stating the word Kroom, Kroom, which is similar to his statement of room when he activates his abilities. However, what he seems to do with this awakened ability is to create some form of energy or aura to coat his blade in. Now, he calls this technique anesthesia, and what he does is he sneaks up on Big Mom and pierces the back of her neck, and it goes out of her jugular. And we learned that him stabbing someone while it's in this form doesn't do them damage, but it does give him the ability to send a shockwave throughout the inside of their body. And after stabbing her, he proceeds to hit her with a move called Shock While. And to my surprise, for the first time in really ever, we see that Big Mom has taken some seriously substantial damage from this. She's bleeding out of the nose and the mouth, and we even see smoke coming out of her mouth after Law activates his attack. And then, while Big Mom is distracted with Law, Kid sneaks up on her and uses his awakened ability, which is called Assign. And it appears that his awakened devil fruit works by assigning magnetism to other people or possibly other objects. So after Big Mom is hit with this ability, all of the warriors on that floor, their weapons start flying toward her, including her own Napoleon. And then we see that the metal beams of the tower start to collapse in on her. And then the chapter ends on a beautiful panel of her letting out a scream while we get the reveal of Kid's attack, which is called Punk Clash. Now that concludes the events of the chapter. It was kind of jumping all over the place, but ultimately it was a very enjoyable chapter. I mean, we got some big reveals, some new conflicts, some updates, and we even got Usopp on the move. I'll discuss more about Usopp towards the discussion portion of the video, but for right now, let's get into the ratings. And as usual, I will always start with the artwork. And for this chapter, I'm actually going to go ahead and give it a 10. And I'm giving it a 10, not because I was utterly blown away by the artwork. There was nothing that was horribly impressive, but the artwork itself was good and consistent throughout the entire chapter from beginning to end. And unlike the last couple chapters where we see a few inconsistent panels or some blurred out perspective shots, this one didn't indulge in any of those goofy tropes. And even though there weren't any artistically flexing shots, there were some really cool panels and some really cool pages that are really deserving of some good praise. And so while it's not a masterpiece in terms of artwork, it is an incredibly impressive chapter in comparison to all of Wano that we've seen so far. So many amazing panels, so many amazing pages, and all of it is consistent. Now, in terms of the story for this week's chapter, I'm going to go ahead and give that a 9. It was not the most impressive story overall, but what we did get did set us up for some stuff and did reveal a little bit of information on how this could all play out. Now, the only reason I'm not giving this a 10 is because I personally feel like the whole Kinemon's legs can still separate thing is a bit of a cop-out and a convenient way to proactively get the Straw Hats involved in their fight and in their situation. But aside from that, the whole Big Mom situation is starting to pan out in a way that makes it seem like she is finally beatable by Law and Kid in particular. Not to mention that we have the added tension of Kanjuro's dying move being used to detonate the bombs in the basement and to kill everyone on Onigashima. And at the same time, we have Yamato racing to the basement to do the exact opposite. And then if you add on the reveal of CP0 getting on the move to potentially capture Robin, this is just a masterful way for Oda to use this chapter to really crank up the tension that we feel for all of these situations and their needs to be resolved immediately. So as I said before, it was kind of jumping all over the place, and that would be the only reason why I didn't give it a 10, and that's because the story wasn't really super fluid. Now, moving on to the hype rating for this chapter, I'm going to give that a 10 also. And that might seem a bit generous, but there is a lot to get hype about. We have the beginning of the chapter with Scratchman, Apu, and Drake and their potential alliance. We have the middle of the chapter with Kinemon, Kanjuro, Orochi, and their budding situation. We got tension in the form of CP0 being on the move, and we got the awesomeness of a great fight interaction between Big Mom, Law, and Kid. Not to mention the reveal that 2 of these Worst Generation members have awakened devil fruit powers. And heck, even the way they ended the chapter is incredibly hype. I can't wait to see the next one. I mean, with them affecting Big Mom in the way they did throughout this chapter, I wouldn't be surprised to see that the unrevealed result of that final attack, the Punk Clash, might be something devastating to Big Mom. So I'm very interested to see how all the hype leads that we got in this chapter culminate and where it'll end up for the next chapter in terms of continuing that tension or that build up for the conflict. So yeah, even though the hype should have been cut down by the fact that they were jumping around throughout the entire chapter, each scene that we jump to managed to have some aspect of hype attached to it, with the exception of the whole Kinemon's legs and Usopp thing. So yeah, I think it's well deserving of a 10 in terms of hype. So after the math is done, that gives this week's chapter 1030 of One Piece, a 9.3 for an overall rating. I mean, it was just really good content, great artwork, and a lot to look forward to. So now we get on to the discussion portion of the video, and the first thing I want to talk about is Usopp. I'm glad to see that he's separating from Nami and from a larger group, because it makes me kind of feel like he might be possibly getting into a major conflict or a major fight of his own. And I mean, yeah, he did have a little bit of conflict with Alti and Page One in the past, but I didn't really feel like that was a moment for him to shine. So I hope that Oda doesn't squander this opportunity with something like, just having him scoop up the unconscious Scabbers and just move them to somewhere safe. The only narrative issue with that is that I personally can't see anyone who would fit as an important matchup for Usopp. So let's hope that Oda doesn't drop the ball for this opportunity and does somehow manage to get Usopp in a 1v1 that we can deem as respectable. Now, the next thing I do want to discuss is going to be Scratchman Apu. Now, I have always assumed and asserted that he would be the type of guy who would eventually join up with his worst generation compatriots and join their side in taking down Kaido. But it seems that he wants to ride the sidelines and keep himself in the numbers uninvolved until one side actually wins. And then he, his numbers, and Drake could go finish off the victor of that battle. And since we don't get an answer from Drake, I'm inclined to assume that he's either going to turn him down or just flat out convince him to go assist Luffy and the other Straw Hats in fighting against the Beast Pirates. And narrowly, I'm only saying this because of his status as a Marine. I mean, from the way it seemed when Drake switched sides, it looked like he was kind of using Luffy as a savior of sorts. So it'll be very interesting to see where that route takes us. And the final thing that I want to talk about is going to be awakened devil fruits. We get the official reveal that Law and Kid are both awakened. Now, I'll be honest, this is a pleasant surprise, but the thing that really kind of makes this exciting for me is thinking that this could be a tip-off that we might get to see Luffy's awakened abilities by the end of the Wano arc. Now, that's just wishful thinking on my part, but I can't help but feel like our experience with the awakened fruit is so short in this chapter that there'll be more to be elaborated upon by the time we get near the end of the Wano arc. And now, lastly, I want to discuss Big Mom. We've seen in this chapter that she's being pushed to a limit of sorts. I mean, we get to see that Law's attack has made her bleed from internal damage. And that is an incredibly rare sight for any One Piece fan, to see Big Mom in that kind of pain or taking that kind of physical damage. And this could mean that if she was ever attacked with advanced armament haki, or Rio as some people call it, maybe this could be the way that she is eventually defeated. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't recall anyone ever using any advanced armament haki on Big Mom, at least not successfully anyway. But it is promising to see that internal damage could be the way that she's eventually defeated. But I suppose if that is the case, we'll have to wait until next chapter when we see the extent of Law's or Kid's damage to Big Mom. In any case, this video has gone on long enough. I am John from AF Anime. If you guys enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this chapter, or if there's anything you want to discuss, let me know. I'm all ears. So I am out. I will catch you guys in the next video.